Okay, so things brightened up a little. 60s out there now, so we're feeling like a little more human. Had to get out and get some work done out on the range, and I've been. We left off last time. We were talking about how the recoil impulse translates itself to the firearm, and some of the things that are happening when that impulse is transmitted through the firearm. I started early on in this YouTube thing. I was going to document a few things. I was going to build some guns, go on the circuit, and kind of document what it's like to shoot competition, to shoot matches. And I had, I'm set up mostly for, and I'm fairly cognizant of how to, what it takes to win in the 600-yard, 1,000-yard realm. 100-yard, 200-yard group shooting is a whole different. I'm ready to get into it. I've done it just a little bit, but I'm going to get my ass handed to me there. These are the best shooters on the planet, best guns on the planet, shooting under conditions such that they can actually read the conditions over the course of 100 yards or 200 yards or 300 yards. So, no excuses. Long range stuff, anything beyond 300 yards, 600, 1,000, is highly dependent on conditions. Normally the morning relays win the day because the morning relays are the most consistent. You get into the afternoon, it's starting to get blustery. Sometimes that can reverse. But in long range stuff, equipment is highly important. Ability is highly important. But I don't care who you are, you really can't read the wind out to 600 or 1,000 yards. There's guys that are much better at it than others. There's guys that have taken it to an extreme science. My range, just out the door here now, is I can shoot out to 600 yards right out my window. So I spend my time in here talking about stuff, and I spend my time out there shooting stuff, and I spend most of my time working to pay for this stuff. So that aside, done whining about that, what I've decided to do today is again talk about that recoil impulse, just to show you what it is that we're dealing with here. So I'm bringing in a gun that let's see, I got stuff scattered all over here. But here's one that we've been just running through the ringer. This is kind of a very generic 300 WSM build. Try to bring that camera into where you can see it. So this is a hunting gun, and it's a 10-inch twist, 300 WSM. Don't know if you can read any of this, but we're looking at, this is a light gun. This is a carry gun. This is just a little, this is a hunting gun. There's a few things that are important on a hunting gun. Number one, you got to be able to carry it like this. These great scrotal hang down things, this AR-15 looking, you know, Badger bottom metal, 15 round sack hanging down stuff, makes it into a two-handed gun. You don't hunt. It's like hunting with your cell phone. It's like some baggy, saggy kid walking around the woods the way the world works right now, walking down the street bumping foreheads with people because you got both hands tied up on your phone. So, two-handed guns are stupid. This is a one-hand gun. It's light. I mean, this thing, the way it sits right now, weighs 5 3/4 pounds, maybe 6 pounds. This is actually a carbon fiber stock. This, by the way, is the McWoody. Kind of interesting. Macmillan puts this out. But we're talking about the impulse that's generated on something like this. This is a very, I say it's a generic setup because this is a low-end custom, walk around, pack around, quarter-minute gun. Quarter-minute guns are not thick on the ground. To make it a 1/4 minute gun, I've threaded the end because it might be that it has to have a, well, first of all, it's threaded for muzzle brake. But I might have to use a tunable muzzle brake. Right now, it shoots 1/4 minute naked with nothing on the front. But it kicks like a freaking mule. So, this goes back to what I was talking about in another segment. The 300 Win Mag is a problem gun because to be used the way it's designed to be used, it's too big for normal people to shoot. This falls into the same class. It doesn't have quite the power factor of a 300 Win Mag, but the 300 WSM is like a hot-rodded 30-06. I can take Lapo 30-06 brass and essentially match the 300 WSM in a long action. But this is just one of my favorite cartridges on the planet for a light handy pack around gun. But remember what I was talking about with these. When Sammy Sosa smacks the end of this thing and it tries to tear out of the stock, everything that you thought you knew about pillar bedding and why it was there goes out the window because it's all crap. Pillar, aluminum, this has pillars of course in it. But the pillars in this are not there to keep the stock from compressing. I can easily keep the stock from compressing with fiberglass. Just bed the columns. That's nothing. Instead, the reason that I put aluminum pillars in there, and I grind some big grooves around those pillars, is to, yes, lock the pillars into the stock, yes, set the distance, keep it from compressing. But more than all of that is so that this tuning fork, remember in one of the other segments, the tuning fork is still here because it wasn't that long ago. I submit that for the gun to shoot well, it has to be as repeatable as a tuning fork, with the lower segment of the fork being here. And if I were to hang a pod on here, which is common, normally this gun will probably be hunted with a pod quite a bit. I have to be able to tune it such that this leg of the tuning fork and the firmly affixed pod, by the way, this pod's got to be on here. Like, this is not, again, this is not something to be taken lightly. That pod's got to be put on. I'll probably add, again, this gun is put together. I did note that there's a custom die required on it. Don't know if you can read that on there. Because this is short, it'll shoot, it will fire factory 300 WSM rounds, and it'll fire them into under a 1/2 inch. Cheapo Federals probably go closer to 1/4, but that's neither here nor there. To reload this requires custom dies to get it to work right. But that's something we're going to cover as we go. That's all different. Right now we're talking about the tuning fork. We're talking about the fact that when this barrel tries to hump and rip itself up out of there, we've got aluminum affixed in here, and this stock is actually a $700 stock. This is not it's all that, and it's reinforced through this area. This is heavily got at one time they called it the sniper fill. I don't know what's it, but anyway, it's got hard fill that extends up and back. This is just one of my favorite platforms on the planet. In the McWoody, I just like the McWoody because at first glance it kind of looks like a cheesy Uncle Walnut. It's a nice little transitional look, but it's a carbon fiber stock. It's an and this area in here is reinforced, but here's some problems. When this thing tries to rip out of here, understand, the tuning fork is trying to come apart. This thing, and boom, it's pulling back, it's slamming back, and it's popping up, and those columns, those aluminum pillars in there, transfer down. This whole plate then becomes a resistance to the uplift force. Now, when this goes like this, it bends the action. So we've got a column here, and we've got some heavy, I actually drilled back, and I got this epoxy matrix in here just a little bit firmer, and I'll scratch through the soft stuff till I get to the hard stuff, and I'll make sure I fix. So the transfer forces right here are actually transferring to the outer shell. So I've got the column, I've dug in and scratched, and I've got it flared to where it goes out and the epoxy is affixed to the outer shell. So this column adds rigidity. So when this thing tries to flex, now this area through here is weak and wimpy just because of the fact that this has this is hollow in here. There's no magazine box. So and the reason I'm doing this slowly is because I want you to wrap your head around the flexures that are involved. This is bending upward as though you had hooked a pipe on it and just bent the end up or hit it with a baseball bat. It's tearing up. And again, this can be verified. High-speed videos can verify this. Go on the internet and look at this. I mean, this thing humps. It goes like crazy. So the function of those columns, the function of those bedding blocks, the function of the aluminum pillars, the pillar bedding, are not only to tighten down consistently to a solid, but also when it goes to resist the force this is trying to tear up, it's pulling on that screw right there. This is bedded in place. It's not just screwed in. And again, there's some reinforcement bedding. So when this tries to go up, it would have to suck this right through the stock. Instead, it tries to flex this area here, which is going to bring us into one of the reasons that I go against my principles and use these stupid hanging down magazine assemblies, AI assemblies. And we're going to talk about the fact that I've shortened a bunch of magazines. And there are people that are actually making shortened magazines that will go up in here flush. They won't go into this one. I've got every brand of magazine here, and I keep them in a lot of cases in the packages because a lot of them don't fit. This whole AI thing, there's a half a dozen people making magazines and dozens of people making what's called bottom metal for these Remington 700 style actions. And it's to solve a real problem. It's the problem of feeding. A hunting gun's got to be able to cycle fast. Speaking of that, so does a target rifle, and that's another of the things we're going to get into. I'm going to note down. Take a piece of paper and note down. Cycle fast. We're going to talk about that. Group shooting, whether it's 100 yards or 1,000 yards, you're doing your best to pick a condition, read the conditions, pick a condition. By condition, I mean a consistent movement of the swimming pool. The air mass is moving consistently. It doesn't matter if it's moving 30 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. What you don't want is dead still. Dead still will get you. Dead still's got gremlins lurking in it. That bullet goes through the air like this. But a nice consistent movement of the air mass, and if you can get that to hold up long enough to get your 5 shots down, you try to boom, and you're loading from this side because these are not repeaters. Now when it comes to a hunting gun, we can have a repeater, so it's boom, tuk tuk, boom, tuk tuk, boom, tuk tuk, boom. That's really what these are designed for, is to be able to make a gun feed. Nah, that one fits. And I was hoping I could find something that I cut down here. And this is a homemade one. Doesn't fit in this. But this goes in closer to flush. Okay? So again, you can put together a hunting gun. This is the key. A hunting gun that can do 2 things. Take that huge recoil impulse and also cycle well. And there's a lot that goes into that. That's some of the stuff we're going to talk about. It's Easy to make a glued-in 6 ppc bench rest gun by just following the build pattern, coloring within the lines, connecting the dots on your jigsaw puzzle. Back to the tuning fork. The bench rest gun has got a light stock with a very heavily configured forend and very stiff forend. The barreled action is connected to that stock by glue. Essentially all winning bench rest guns are glued together. Furthermore, the rules are such that magazines are disallowed in most group shooting, high-end group shooting, not over the course stuff, but bench rest stuff. So most of the guns, most of the actions are single shot, which means they're solid across the bottom, which means that when that thing tries to flex, that barrel out there is trying to do its thing. I might have to take that, I am working. When that thing's trying to hump up, that stiffness at the bottom of the action helps. It goes back to what I was showing you with this, well, right here. This action's got a great big hole cut in the bottom of it. It makes it a lot more flexible between these two pillars. This area right in here is just floating free. The way this is configured, this particular pillar in the front's pulling up, which is transferring to here, so we're getting some, but that's also bending this whole assembly, and it's picking up again on this pillar, which is affixed to here. But if you figure the motions involved here, when you're trying to bend this up out, if you were to put this in a vise and stick a pipe out there and jack it and just bend this up slowly and rip it, you'd see some, build this in your mind. That's why I do it. I want you to think about it in those terms. So, accurate bench rest stuff is going to be solid bottomed. It's going to be glued to the stock, and this stock is going to have a big heavy forend out here so that the tuning fork is completed. Everything behind here is basically a waste of everybody's time. Now, there's a balance point. Generally, the balance point is going to be right here. So this back here, if it gets too soft, the gun will wag its tail, which means there has to be enough meat through here. Again, we're talking bench rest build here. You're going to find a big meaty forend, a big meaty area through here. This back here can be light, but it's got to be stiff enough that if we're to add weights back here, like if we're going to change from a 10.5 pound competition gun to a 13.5, or I actually have one where I took a 13.5 pound gun and had some barrels built for it to convert it to a 16 pound gun. So it's a heavy group gun and it's a light long range gun. 600 yard and 1,000 yard guns are 16, 17 pound guns in the light class. In 100, 200 yard bench rest, you've got the 10.5 pound class and the 13.5 pound class. So I took a 13.5 pound class gun with 6 ppc barrels and put weights in the back and got it to shoot teeny tiny dots, won a little bit of paper with it, shooting it at 600 yards because the gun came together and balanced really, really well using the 6x47 cartridge, which is the 308 sized impulse. And that again is a gun that's glued all the way through so that the tuning fork is intact. So when it comes to trying to take, and it's a solid bottom single shot, everything about that tuning fork is very, very solid, very, very rigid, very, very repeatable. Now we cut a hole in the bottom so that we can feed cartridges up through. We get rid of the nice big forend on the tuning fork. This forend gets cut down to where it's just a little thing. You can see all of the ways that when you're trying to drag bench rest stuff into the hunting realm, you keep shooting yourself in the foot because you keep taking away the things that make a bench rest gun shoot. So we're going to go through and try to explain some ways to change the affixment, because what I want to end up with here is a repeatable high impulse gun that shoots. See, the other thing is it's very easy to make a 16, 17, 18, 20 pound big gun work. Just scale it up. In other words, if the 300 WSM is like a blown up PPC cartridge dimensionally, you can build a PPC 10.5 pound gun and it shoots really, really good. Now you take the same thing, double the poundage, or bring it up to 15, 16 pounds, do everything the same, glue it all together, make it a 300 WSM, account for the added recoil impulse with a weight. So in other words, scale it up, the weight along with the recoil impulse, and the gun will shoot just essentially like a PPC. It has some other problems, but it'll shoot extremely well. Unfortunately, a 16, 17, 18 pound gun is really hard to hunt with. So where we're going now, this series is about building some bench rest stuff and about applying some bench rest principles to some standard action stuff, and how we're going to do that, how we're going to affix and make that tuning fork.